depending on what you ask, it will give you a different answer. And I like to think of this as garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you don't ask it very, very specific questions, it's going to give you a generic answer because you haven't given it a lot of context. The more context you give it, the better and more specific the answer you will get. So just sort of keep that in mind.
One other
Yeah,
sorry,
go for it.
Rochelle, can I jump in?
Yeah.
One other implication is the training data set, because it's taking that and it's saying these are the most likely types of information that's there, it's susceptible to bias. So if there's a lot of data that's about a specific thing that maybe isn't representative of what you're doing, it will give you answers in that direction. So understanding what the models are trained on is important because that can lead to this bias. Because again, it's simulating what it knows to give you the answers.
Yeah. So it's basically based on whatever information goes into it. So I think we've all heard about bias. For example, if you put in a doctor, I want a picture of a doctor, it's generally going to be male because maybe the pictures that it used were largely male, maybe Caucasian doctors. And so that's what it thinks a doctor is, right? So there's a lot of things around racial, gender, sort of bias that we're seeing that's coming up. So that's kind of something to keep in mind is how was it trained? What data did it use? And the more data it has about a certain thing, the more heavily that's weighted, right, in its model. So if it sees something, a million times and it starts to believe, well, that's pretty close to probably what everybody thinks is the truth. Now, that may or may not be the truth, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And then it may generate plausible sounding but incorrect information. So these are these hallucinations. This is the information that it has. Again, it's because it's doing simulations. It is not basically, it's taking that information, synthesizing it, and then spitting something out that it thinks is plausible, not necessarily truth, right? So again, I like to think about, have you ever had like a small child and they can't read and you ask them to read the book to you and they know the pictures, but they come up with a completely different story? It's kind of like, like that where this is a creative tool. And so that creativity sometimes is a little too creative if you're looking for facts. So you need to really understand and learn also how to prompt it to make sure that it is actually giving you the facts that you want. James, go for it.
Did anyone see in the news about how Google, they had some search results? And the one I really thought was funny was if your toppings slide off your pizza, how do you make sure that your toppings stay on? And it suggested that you add an eighth of a cup of Elmer's glue to stick your toppings on the pizza so they don't slide. And it gave a whole logical reason why this was a good idea. And yeah. So, and that was a problem. It was incorrect information that had been scraped from Reddit. There was a joke that was then being fed through the system, and it didn't know that this was a bad idea.
Right.
So
yeah, glue on pizza toppings is not really good. So this is why you always have to validate and verify what comes back at you, right? So that's something to keep in mind.